It's time to dive back into the world of Pokemon. The newest generation of games had a lot of controversy over performance, and they still do. But they did try to be a little more ambitious with how open and detailed they were. Almost a year later, we have Pokemon Home Support got a great little event with Mew vs Mewtwo that called back to the old anime movie, and the DLC expansions have begun. Here is my review of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's first DLC of 2, the Teal Mask. When it comes to story, this DLC can take place during or after the events of Scarlet and Violet proper. A field trip is being done to Kitakami, a new area that consists of a small village at the base of a mountain. And of course, you are selected randomly to visit on this field trip. Leaving behind the likes of Nimona and Penny in Paldea, you befriend siblings Carmine and Kieran as you learn about the area's mask festival and mythical tale between an ogre and the so-called Loyal 3 Pokemon. Now, overall, this story is a mixed bag for me. I found the backstory for the legendary and area pretty good, but the direction they took to the new characters I wasn't a huge fan of. I can't say much because of spoilers, but I felt that one of them went in a direction that seemed a bit excessive, not to mention the fact that it was clearly only pushed that way to set them up as a specific type of character in the next expansion with the Indigo Disc. When it comes to gameplay, or rather content, the Teal Mask adds a new region for you to explore, complete with its own world map. It's a decently large area, about a sixth the size of the main world map of Scarlet and Violet, consisting of a few town and landmark areas and a few different biomes, from a forest and apple orchard to the volcanic mountain. And just like the Sword and Shield downloadable content, you don't have to beat the main story of Scarlet and Violet to tackle this DLC. It level scales according to whatever your current story progression is, be it having all of the enemies around level 12 to 20 or 60 to 70. Now, the main thing to go over here are what you can do and what Pokemon were added back into the game. This part of the DLC brings back about 91 Pokemon from pretty much all generations, from Clefairy and Snorlax to Morpeko and Milotic, plus the ability to finally bring Jirachi over from the Gen 4 remakes via Pokemon Home, something that was not possible during the Mew vs Mewtwo update a couple months back. It's also worth noting that many TMs have returned to the expansion, including Gyro Ball, Solar Blade, and Toxic. As far as what you can do that's new, the story of this DLC sends you all over the new region for the Ogre and 3 loyal Pokemon part of the plot, as well as a post-game mini-story around the Blood Moon Beast after you catch 150 Pokemon in Kitakami's dex. This gives you a couple little campaigns to do, each with a fair amount of trainer battles and wild story encounters. There are also a lot of normal trainers littered around the map, and a few side quests you can do, like tracking down the trainers of the Ogre clan or helping a couple lovebirds in town. In other words, there's a pretty decent amount of stuff to do, but it doesn't really feel like that much unless you go out of your way to find and do every little side mission. It felt a lot more like the appeal was in the returning content than the new. Granted, it is fun to do all of this, but it was very similar to the Isle of Armor from Sword and Shield. Essentially, it includes some neat stuff here and there, but a lot more of Game Freak's eggs were in the basket for DLC 2 with the upcoming Indigo Disc. That brings us to content and length, which will vary depending on what you want to do. Since the Teal Mask came out, I've put almost 30 hours on my save file for Violet, but a lot of that was Pokemon Home transferring in raids to build up my new team. The actual story content of this expansion will likely take you about 3 to 5 hours, give or take, plus whatever exploration you want to do. It's not massive, but not bad. Now let's very quickly touch on presentation. I won't be docking points from the DLC for this, but it's worth noting that many of the previous performance issues with Scarlet and Violet are still present in the game now. A lot of the experience will still have frame drops and slowdown when moving quickly in the more dense areas. It's not game breaking and it isn't any worse than it was before, but it's very noticeable. Again, I will not be docking points from the DLC for this, as this is a Scarlet and Violet issue and not a flaw unique to this expansion. Though considering we have the same performance issues with a much smaller map with Kitakami, does bring up the notion that perhaps Scarlet and Violet didn't go too big with the base game, but more an issue with the engine they developed for it. Anyways, let's wrap this up. In conclusion, The Teal mask is part 1 of this DLC and adds some interesting things, from the story beats for its new legendary to a nicely sized map for you to explore to help you grab the new TMs and about 90 returning Pokemon. Now, on the downside, some of the story development I wasn't a huge fan of, and despite it having some new and interesting additions, it felt very much like what Isle of Armor was for Sword and Shield. Fun new place to explore, but more appeal on team building returning Pokemon and waiting for the Indigo Disc. Reviews to Go rates the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, the Teal Mask, for the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.